And we're live. Welcome to the Sports Sesh podcast. I'm your host, Mason Shatwell, and my co host is James Evans. And today it's the final show of 2020. We're ending it on number 30. And again, we're joined by Alex Pattle, the first recurring guest of the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, guys. Thank you for having me.
So, obviously, since we last spoke, everything in the sports world has changed quite a bit. We've had fans being allowed back in, and now in London, now not going to be allowed back in. But we've had the start of the new Premier League season. How would you assess the season so far?
I think it's been really interesting. I mean, it's been nice to see certain teams like Southampton and, dare I say it, like my own West Ham doing fairly well, and also like Spurs. I mean, I don't know how sustainable their kind of form is and whether they can mount a genuine title charge, but it's been nice to see some changes, and like difficult to say whether it would have been the same if the fans had been around, or as you mentioned, they've been in and out. So if they've been consistently around or not. But I think it's been entertaining, and yeah, just hopefully we're slowly getting back towards having the fans there. Yeah.
Well, as you mentioned, you as a West Ham fan. Before we go on to the Premier League properly, your FA Cup draw, Stockport County away. That's my hometown club. How are you liking that tie?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I suppose our track record in the cups in recent years hasn't been great, so I'm hesitant to get kind of too excited about any draw, no matter who we face. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those where I feel at West Ham maybe there's a similarity with like clubs, say like Newcastle, Everton, where you just really. I don't think there's much of an excuse for not putting together a decent cup run. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it seems like we always struggle. Maybe Everton have had a bit more success in recent years, but still. So yeah, I'm not getting too carried away, but yeah, I'd like to think it's a winnable fixture with our current form as well. I'd like to think it's winnable.
Yeah, I think it's more than winnable for West Ham, but for someone like my club, I literally live 2 minutes down the road from the stadium. It's hopefully fans are going to be allowed in for that one because review restrictions are happening tomorrow. But obviously, it's going to be a more than winnable game for West Ham just because the magnitude of the club. Who knows? It might get to the Stockport players, but it might not. But I think Stockport at the moment we're doing quite well. We've had quite a few games missed due to COVID, COVID within the club. But since being back, we've beat Yeovil just about in extra time to go through to the third round, and we've beat the likes of Bromley in the cup. Well, not the cup, sorry, in the league. But we're doing well now. But I think I'm probably sounding a bit biased, but I think it's a winnable tie for both fixtures. I think depending how West Ham turn up, if they turn up how they have in recent cup years,
Yeah.
Stockport could slightly get a goal. Luckily, well, it wouldn't be luckily, but they could edge it. But who knows? I think it's more than a winnable fixture. But how would you assess West Ham's season so far?
I think it's been really promising. I mean, it's funny because I think so much has been made of how well Southampton have done. And this was maybe a week or so ago, but I was looking at the table and thinking, wow, like, so much has been made of that, but we were actually ahead of them. Which is not to say like they are doing fantastically well. And I think obviously with Southampton, the narrative has been like a year on from the thrashing by Leicester. It kind of just makes it feel even more impressive. But West Ham were really, struggling a year ago as well. So I think it's been encouraging. I mean, I'd love to say that we're going to stay in and around where we're at. I'd love to say that we'll be able to challenge for a European place. But I just think, you've got, City are kind of slowly climbing back up the table. And I just think to finish in the top six is actually a very difficult thing to do when you look at the number of great teams there are around. So, but I think, you know what? I've always wanted Moyes to do well. I've not necessarily always been his biggest fan, but obviously I would rather that he did well than not do well and give people an excuse to say Moyes out. But I think it's just one of those things, for whatever reason, it's taken a bit more time for him to, implement some solidity in the team. But it feels like it's kind of finally starting to happen. And but then also we've got, we do have some creative players in there. And I think for him, it's just, it took maybe longer than we hoped, but he's got a more solid foundation in there now. And it's kind of giving the more creative players a bit of a platform to do their thing as well. So yeah, it's been nice. It's just always nice not to be in a relegation battle, to be honest. I know that sounds like a fairly humble aspiration, but not having to go through that stress for a season is a welcome relief, to be honest.
I think given your start as well, I think many people, especially myself, after your couple of first games or so, I certainly predicted you to go down, but then you turned it around with that performance at the Emirates. Did you win at the Emirates? Yeah. Was it? Yeah, and then I think that was the sort of turning point of your season. And then you picked up big points away to Leicester as well, and you've just gone on this sort of unprecedented run since. Given your sort of current crop, out of all the sort of players in various positions, do you think in January you need to strengthen at all, or are you happy with what you've got right now?
I kind of feel like maybe up top we could strengthen. I mean, yeah, like, I kind of feel like the main thing I think when I look at our team is just we invested a lot in Haller, and I just don't think it's, I want him to do well, and kind of earlier in the season there was that period where he was kind of scoring basically in every cup game he was playing in. And we were a lot of fans, I think, were willing Moyes just to give him more game time. And Anderson as well. And obviously he ended up, going out on loan. But it kind of feels like there needs to be another option up top with Antonio. The problem with Antonio is that even once he's back, the way he plays, it's just kind of... it's always going to lead to an injury at some point or some sort of burnout. And he's done so well the last couple of seasons, kind of since the restart, he's done especially well up top. But he's still not, I don't know, maybe he is now becoming a proper striker. But, historically he's played out wide. He's even played right back for periods. And I just think having an out-and-out striker to challenge kind of, Haller, or even, to be honest, to play regularly in his place, knowing that Antonio is not necessarily always going to be someone we can count on. I think that would be the main area. Other than that, I don't think we need to kind of change things up too much. Do you know what I mean? I think things are working pretty well. So yeah, maybe giving ourselves a bit of depth in a season where there are so many fixtures close together, so many issues, whether it's injury or coronavirus related. I think having a little bit of depth is always good. But other than up top, I think the rest of the starting lineup, there's nowhere I'm thinking we really need replacements, if that makes sense.
Who would you give the star player so far this season to?
It might be an obvious one to say Rice, but I think he just, like last season, he seemed to be off it a little bit. And so I think seeing him perform again, it really does just kind of put into perspective what a quality player he is. And I think all West Ham fans are realistic. We don't expect him to be around forever. So I think it's just kind of, enjoying him while he's there. But also I think, he kind of got the captain's armband, started getting it semi-regularly last season for the first time as Noble's been playing less. And I don't know, I feel like, again, it kind of coincided with his performances dropping off a bit. Whereas this season, it does kind of feel like he's almost fully, getting to the point of fully replacing Noble. He's consistently captain, and he seems to be shouldering that responsibility better. So it's not just his performances in terms of like the football he's playing, but I think to also see an improvement from last season and to see him maybe mentally dealing with that aspect of captaining the side, I think that's been really impressive, to be honest.
How would you assess the start of the season for the Big Six? So as you say,
I think interesting. So Liverpool, for all of their injuries, I have to say, fair enough for how well they've still managed to do. And I think of the 4-0 against Wolves, a couple of weeks ago, I think particularly stood out when it was, far from their best 11, but it was such a comprehensive performance against a very talented team. So I think Liverpool will probably get it done in the long run. I mean, if they're still performing at this level with some of those injuries, whether or not they reinforce in January, I don't know. But I think even if it's late in the season that Van Dijk and Gomez come back, I think they'll probably have enough. And just having gotten over the line now, having won the league, I think mentally They know they can do it. City has been really curious. I think that's a difficult one. Obviously, like they're increasingly unable to rely on Aguero, and maybe it's showing kind of. I mean, he's obviously a phenomenal talent, but maybe we're just starting to see how problematic almost it's been, how much they've relied on him. But again, I do think, as I said, they're starting to slowly climb. So I do think they'll end up much closer to the top than they are now. But I think, is it too much ground to make up? Maybe. Beyond that, like I said, Spurs, really impressive. I think given a year ago, a lot of people didn't think Jose was the right fit for Tottenham from a footballing perspective, which I completely understand. I think the other argument was that maybe they both kind of needed each other. Maybe Spurs needed someone to change the mentality, and maybe he needed a proper kind of project to rejuvenate him. I mean, you could argue United to a degree is still a project, but maybe not the right one. Whereas I feel like with Tottenham, maybe he feels like he can sink his teeth into that a bit more. And I like when Mourinho is doing well, I really like him. When he's not doing well, I think he gets a bit tedious the way he speaks in the media. But when he's doing well, I think he's entertaining. And yeah, I like to see anyone prove someone or people wrong. So yeah, that's been impressive. And then yeah, beyond that, United, just don't think Solskjaer is the right person. And I think the sooner they can get Pochettino, if they can get him without letting him slip to Real Madrid, I think they should, because it seems to be kind of all these false dawns with Solskjaer. He gets the results just about when he needs them, and there's a promising run, but it's not. This isn't like some comprehensive change in the philosophy of the attitude of the players, and I don't think he's a good enough technician. So yeah, is there anyone I'm forgetting? Liverpool, City, United, Spurs. So Arsenal, I think, is really confusing in as much. Well, I thought there was genuine evidence of progress under Arteta from the moment he came in, kind of right through to the summer, to those FA Cup games and the Community Shield. I felt like their mentality was changing. I felt like there were like individuals, like just for example, Xhaka, I thought had come on loads. So I thought there were numerous areas where you could see improvements. And it's strange now how much they've dropped off. But I think it's on the players, not Arteta. In all honesty, I think he's got a really clear understanding of what the team needs to be. Mm-hmm. I just think it's those growing pains of getting the formation that he wants, like implementing the formation he wants, and not quite having the players. And I was talking to a friend last night who's a big Arsenal fan, and I think he made a great point that some of the transfers, the ones that were Arteta's, more so like Partey and Gabriel, I think have been pretty good. And I think longer term they will be good, especially Partey. But some of the other ones, maybe where there was a greater agent influence, maybe they're the ones that kind of, haven't necessarily paid off as much,
Yeah.
What do you make of the return of the fans? Because from my perspective anyway, I think they've made a big difference, even though it's that sort of 2,000 to 4,000 bracket. I think they've made a big difference. Obviously, me being a Chelsea fan, the Everton faithful on Saturday night, I mean, even without the crowd noise, they were just absolutely blistering right from minute 1 to minute 90. Mm-hmm. And you look at the games with Crystal Palace and Tottenham, Fulham, Liverpool, the crowd back in their team, it's obviously that old adage being the 12th man. It certainly helps. And you look at Guaita's performance against Tottenham. Mm-hmm. I know he probably could have saved Kane's goal, but he was immense from start to finish. Do you think they've made a big difference since obviously returning to stadiums?
I think maybe, yeah. I mean, it's just nice to see them back, full stop, to be honest. I think the one thing I do sympathise with is the fact that, not every ground can have the fans.
Yeah.
I do think that is kind of a shame, but I don't think there's a right answer there. I think you do, if you can get fans in, you need to get them in where you can to try and get some normality back and help the clubs out, financially. I do think maybe they have made a bit of a difference. I think it's got to be a boost to the players, right? I think they've certain teams have performed admirably considering the lack of supporters in. But I think thus far maybe we're already started to see like the impact that the fans can have. So yeah, as I said, it's slightly tricky issue for certain reasons, but I'm certainly for getting even more in or across more grounds at least as soon as they can. And it's just been refreshing, to be honest. It's what, I haven't been against the games going ahead without fans. It's been a nice distraction this year to have football regardless, but certainly the fans obviously make it. I know people say that a lot and maybe it's cliche, but that's what it's about. And that genuine atmosphere, I think, was just been so refreshing to see in the last week or so.
Well, with the games that I was able to have fans, some of the stadiums now in London that aren't able to, do you think after having fans back for a game or two and now being back to not able to have them, do you think that'll affect the performances at all, or do you think they'll just be used to having played the last few months without the fans?
I think probably the latter. I think because it was such a short period in which fans were in, and they had to know, the players and the clubs had to know there was a chance it would be stop-start. I think they'll probably be okay. I'm sure it'll be frustrating for them, but yeah, I'd imagine it would have been more of an issue maybe if we'd had fans for like a month or more at those clubs, and then this had happened. But no, I don't think it will. I think beyond a bit of frustration and disappointment, I don't think it will affect the performances too much.
How would you assess the Champions League last group stage games in the round of 16 draw?
I thought the last round of games, I mean, the one that obviously sticks out is just United and Leipzig. It's kind of crazy for United to have dispatched them so comfortably in the reverse fixture and then to have lost the way they did. They just should never, the way they started, the first few results United got in the group, they should never have been in that position. They should never have been in that position of needing any sort of result in the final game. Yeah, I mean, credit to Leipzig by all means. And I'm a fan of Nagelsmann for sure. But yeah, that was sort of, that I just thought it was disappointing to see. I mean, I'm kind of somewhat indifferent with United. I mean, it doesn't bother me whether they do well or whether they do poorly, but it gets to a point where I think it's just boring seeing the same kind of issues arise, the same regularity. So it was just a bit frustrating there. As for the draw, I mean, I thought it was a pretty interesting draw, to be honest. I think especially Chelsea versus Atletico. I think that's maybe I don't know. Well, you tell me, James, how you're feeling about it. But as a neutral, I think that's going to be an exciting one.
Yeah, no, it's certainly going to be an exciting one to say the least. We know traditionally the way Diego Simeone sets his side up in the Champions League European stage, he just loves to sit back and eventually scrape that 1-0 win going into the second leg. And I think, to be honest, out of all the teams in the Champions League knockout phase, I would probably fear Bayern Munich the most. And then I'd probably say Atletico Madrid, because they always find a way to get it done in Europe. I'm not really afraid of Barcelona as much as they were, because they don't have that firepower anymore. I think they're too reliant on Lionel Messi. And you look at their results this season, I think they're in mid-table. And, I don't think it's been the best of starts to the Ronald Koeman era at Barcelona. So I think from a Chelsea fan standpoint, it could have gone a lot better for us, because you've obviously got like Porto, Lazio, and Mönchengladbach all in there. So we've been thrown under the bus a bit, but it's that old saying: to be the best, you got to beat the best. And what a way to start with Atletico Madrid. And if we can get a big result away and then scrape it at home, leading on into the quarterfinals, then that'll give us a huge confidence booster going into the likes of Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, because we've already beaten that high elite European side.
I think that's right. I think it's one of those things where you've got to try and take the positive from it. And I think, as you said, if you can get a result there, the boost it will give you will be immense. And for a team like City, who have, struggled in Europe, I almost feel like, don't get me wrong, they'll of course be glad to have drawn, Mönchengladbach, but I almost feel like they could do with, I don't know, maybe a slightly sterner test. Do you know what I mean? But then, having said that, it was really impressive the way they beat Real Madrid last season, and then it just collapsed after that. So yeah, it's so that maybe theory doesn't fully hold true, but yeah, I think for you guys, if you can get a win, it gives you like incredible momentum.
Who do you tip to win the whole competition? Probably Bayern again, or
you know what? Like, I am really tempted to say Bayern, but there have been times before. I think it's so because of how dominant they were last season, it's so easy to go with them. But there have been other times, like when they won it in 2013, and they had destroyed Barcelona. And then was it the next year when Real Madrid won it, having destroyed Bayern? There have been a number of winners in recent years where you just feel like, how can that team not win it again? And obviously, Real Madrid were finally the team in 2017 to win it back to back for the first time. So yeah, it's one of those where, of course, like with a gun to my head, I would say Bayern, but I just know that in the Champions League, it so rarely goes that way. And yeah, I don't know. So I will go with them, but I mean, I can see, Juve got a great result against Barcelona, obviously in the final game week of the group stage. I'm really interested to see, and they've got Porto, right?
Juventus, yeah, they've got Porto.
A very winnable tie there. I'm interested to see, how far they can go and whether Ronaldo can get it done again. But yeah, I mean, what about you guys? Who are you going with Bayern?
What about you, Jay?
Yeah, no, I definitely say Bayern. I think even though somehow they're still top of the Bundesliga, I believe they're not having the best of runs recently. I just think they've improved over the summer. That sheer squad depth is just unprecedented. The top quality players they have, right from the goalkeeper to the forwards, is just immense. Obviously, I think the likes of Lewandowski, Müller, Sane, the list goes on, will eventually ultimately see them win it back to back, probably for the first time in their history, I think.
I agree with James. I think Bayern's probably got Bayern do have a really strong chance of winning it back to back, just based on the performances and the players they've got at the moment. And I've been really impressed watching them this season. So I do believe Bayern do have the ability, but like you said, Alex, it is so rare to win back-to-back Champions League. It's one of them trophies where anyone who is in it can win. Like everyone's there for a reason, for doing well in their respective leagues. But yeah, I'd go with Bayern. I'm not sure if you covered it when I had to run to the door then, but have you give your prediction on the PSG Barcelona match?
No, actually, it was just crossing my mind now because I was thinking back to Bayern last season and how and that final, obviously it being quite a close final. I don't know. I don't know what the general feeling is. I'm tempted to say PSG because Barca have been, far from their best. And I do just wonder if PSG overcame a bit of a mental hurdle last season, although they didn't have the most difficult run to the final. And maybe not having the two legs kind of helped towards the end. But if it's unlocked something mentally, again, I'm really interested to see not just how they fare against Barca, but how far they can go full stop. But yeah, my early prediction would be PSG. But that's certainly, I think, the most interesting of the lot.
Yeah, 100%. Well, in the other European competition, obviously, my supporting team, United, has Real Sociedad, the Real Sociedad top of the league in La Liga. How do you see that one going? Because I think I was speaking to James yesterday, and I think it's one of them games where I think it's going to be one goal life away on the aggregate scoreline.
It just seems like such a kind of tie for United to lose. I hate to say that. But it's funny because I saw their Twitter when it was announced, and just the first reply being some meme like "We're out, lads," and I know it's kind of tongue in cheek, but I think there's kind of some honesty behind it. It does seem like, it seems like a real banana skin, and it's difficult as well. I mean, how much are you guys going to be prioritizing that competition? I can very much see Sociedad getting it done, but I also think, as you said, it's likely to be really close. It might, in a way, feel similar to the drama of the Leipzig game, in kind of how finely balanced it is, and how it could come down to like a lot of tension late on. Yeah, what about you two?
I think it's like you said, it's got all the ingredients to be a tie for us to lose. But I think I was saying to James yesterday, I think over in their place in Spain, I think it might be a 0-0, and then I think at Old Trafford it might just be one goal either way. I got a feeling they could do what Sevilla did to us in the semis, I think it was last season, because they are a very strong side, the top of the league, so they've got the ability to beat us, but we do have the players to beat them, but it just depends if they're performing on the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's probably one of those competitions now, the Europa League, whereby United have to get a result and they have to go all the way. Otherwise, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has to lose his job ultimately, from my sort of perspective anyway. Because if they don't get top four, they're going to probably go all guns blazing for the Europa League. And I think it's a tough time with Sociedad. Obviously, they've got the likes of David Silva, Oreta Barão, and Adnan Januzaj as well, ex-United player. So they've got a squad capable enough of getting the job done. But ultimately, from Solskjaer's standpoint, they have to go all out in the Europa League, because if they don't qualify for the Champions League via their league form, then the only way to get into the Champions League is through the Europa League. And if they don't win the Europa League and they don't get into the top four, again, I just don't see how Solskjaer can keep his job. So I think with their current squad, I think they've got the capability of going all the way. I think just with their sheer sort of immense attack and just their sort of firepower they've got up top, will just sort of see them through. Because I saw this crazy stat as well. I think as of right now, the Champions League have zero league leaders in the Champions League, whereby in the Europa League they've got 13 league leaders in the knockout stage, which is absolutely incredible. So it has all the ingredients to be a phenomenal competition. So the Europa League might be one to watch this year. So obviously you've got the likes of Tottenham, Shakhtar, they're up there as well, Man United, and there's all sorts of other teams there. Or they're about AC Milan. I've enjoyed watching them this season, domestically in Serie A. So it's going to be a great competition this year. If Solskjaer wants to keep his job, then he has to go up for the Europa League. And I can see a potential English tie in the final between Tottenham and United.
It's funny, I was just thinking that, that's really one that, I mean, I was going to say, I feel like maybe even, as recently as a few weeks ago, a lot of people were making the point about Tottenham in the Europa League. And I think when at the Independent we did our predictions for the season, I think I said Tottenham to win the Europa League, hesitantly. But I mean, obviously, it's so to make a call like that at the start of what's such a long competition is obviously really difficult. And then, as you say, you get to this point, and there are so many league leaders, and it's maybe even more competitive than, or it should be more competitive, maybe even than I thought it would be. But yeah, I'm just interested. I'd love to see an all-English clash, and obviously, there's a greater chance at the moment with there being several Premier League sides in there, and obviously Rangers still being in there as well. So yeah. I think, and as you said, just lots of other interesting teams. Yeah, it's been great to see, Milan doing a bit better this season, hopefully kind of climbing towards something. So yeah, it's just always, it's such a grueling competition, like say United beat Sociedad, that could be a really tricky tie, and it's still only the last 32, there are so many potentially difficult fixtures. And then just to go back to Spurs, I mean, what happens if they are still right at the top of the league as it progresses, You have to prioritize that. If you're still in the running and you've got that thing of we could win the Europa League, we could win the Premier League, we could win both, we could win neither, you've got to go for the league,
100%.
So we'll just move on a bit from football. What did you make of Anthony Joshua's performance at the weekend?
I thought it was kind of what I expected, and not in a good or bad way. I mean, I think Pulev was always going to be kind of stubborn, and I just think it's that. I mean, I think there maybe were some people who just wanted to see AJ put him out in 3 or 4 rounds, and he obviously nearly did. But I also think he showed a bit of wisdom from having learnt from the Ruiz fights to not rush trying to get him out of there. I think Pulev, for what it's worth, did a decent job. Of making it difficult for Joshua to land anything meaningful in the middle rounds. He was kind of closing the distance, and yeah, there was a period in that fight where it was difficult for Joshua to land anything significant. But he just stayed patient and picked the right moment. I guess if he'd won it in 3 or 4, then maybe people would just be saying, playing down Pulev's performance. But I think actually the way it happened, maybe Joshua gets a bit more credit, because it's well, he was in there against someone ridiculously durable, and he put him away, and the way he finished him was fairly impressive. So yeah, I don't think he could be expected to do too much more than what he did. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, that's kind of how I saw it. What about you guys?
Well, I did enjoy watching the fight, but the thing that got me on, well, there was both as guilty as each other, was a couple of times after each round had finished, they'd throw one or two punches at each other, which obviously it's good to watch, but it's a bit of dirty boxing, as you say. But
Yeah.
one thing that I did like about Pulev is after AJ caught him with a good couple of punches, I think round 3 or 4, he just smiled in his face. And I was saying to James yesterday on yesterday's show, what goes through your mind? You're punching a guy and he's there smiling in your face. I don't. Obviously, with someone like AJ, his mental game's going to have to be strong. He's world champion, but would that play a factor mid-fight? You're thinking, I've just punched this guy and he's laughing at me. But one thing with AJ that got me after the fight as well is he was asked about the Tyson Fury fight, and obviously he mentioned his name at the end, saying if it's Tyson Fury, it's Tyson Fury, but he didn't say he wants to fight Tyson, and I think that's what the fans want to see. I think they want to see AJ riled up, and as well as Tyson, and then that'll just make for obviously the biggest fight in British boxing history and one of the biggest fights in heavyweight boxing history as well. But what about you, James? What did you think of the fight?
I think AJ's come a long way since that sort of defeat in New York. I mean, nobody expected the first loss to Andy Ruiz. I mean, I was just absolutely stunned. I mean, I was smiling a bit because I'm a Fury fan, but ultimately you want your British fighters, your fellow countrymen, to do well abroad. But like I said, and then he came back well, beat him in the second rematch in Abu Dhabi, I believe, and in what was a real technical performance. You can tell in AJ's performance that night in Abu Dhabi, it was more technical. He wasn't rushed in his approach. He knew how to get the job done. And I know Ruiz called for the third fight, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I think we saw aspects of Joshua's performance against Ruiz the second time round in the fight with Pulev, because right from the get-go, I think it was clear for everyone to see, he worked from the opening bell, he worked behind the jab very, very well. And I was a big fan of his jab work in the fight. And I think the first 2 rounds obviously were to AJ, and it was relatively tame then, but the third round was where it livened up a bit and it got that knockdown. And then again, I think we saw, and throughout the fight, we saw some very brutal uppercuts from AJ. I think if you stick him against the likes of Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, if that were to happen, you can't afford to be throwing those mean uppercuts, because eventually you will get caught out by one of them. Deontay Wilder's got one of the most dangerous right hands in the heavyweight division, and Tyson Fury will counterpunch accurately in pinpoint time, and maybe even drop you. So he might be able to get away with those brutal uppercuts against the caliber of Pulev. But again, when you put him in the ring against the bigger names, it'll be a tough ask. But I was very impressed with his performance, and kudos to Pulev. I mean, that man's got an iron chin for days. I mean, the amount of punches he took before getting dropped in the ninth is incredible. So he deserves all the praise in the world, because I think his only loss before the AJ fight was to Vladimir Klitschko. And that was Klitschko in his prime, so you've got to give him all the respect in the world. I was very impressed with AJ, very technical, got the job done, and it sets up a fight between either Tyson Fury or maybe even Alexander Usyk, who had a terrific performance in November against Derek Chisora. So either way, Tyson Fury or Alexander Usyk, it's 2 cracking fights, and I cannot wait to see either one of them.
Well, another fight that happened at the weekend, I'm not sure if you guys seen it. Lawrence Okolie won the European Cruiserweight title. What did you make of that fight? Because I thought it was a great performance from AJ's teammate.
Yeah, I mean, he was just so clinical. Obviously his initial opponent withdrew with coronavirus, but as the commentators, I think, made a great point for him to have still gone in there and been so motivated and so clinical. He looked incredibly sharp, and I guess I believe his opponent was undefeated coming into the fight, although it looked like a complete mismatch. But, I think the point was made as well, even in spite of that he's such a technically gifted boxer, and he does have that weight. He's got significant power that, regardless of who he was up against at the weekend, a lot of people at that weight are gonna struggle against him. So I thought he was, I thought he really made the most of his moment, to be honest.
What have you made of the UFC recently? Because we've had some great cards, and obviously last weekend, probably the greatest flyweight fight in history. What did you make of last weekend's card?
Yeah, I mean, I thought even though that card had been hit by various withdrawals, I still think top to bottom, it ended up being like a really enticing card. And I think it kind of delivered. I know I really enjoyed it. I think, as you said, the main event, I think probably was the greatest flyweight title fight ever. Like, immense respect to Moreno, because I think very few people gave him a genuine shot. I know the low blow kind of, maybe had an impact, but he just, I think he showed immense heart and some real moments of quality. I think Figueiredo is incredibly tough. I think against a lot of other opponents, Moreno might have been able to, put them down. But yeah, just I think it's good as well because Figueiredo has rightly got a lot of praise this year. But, excuse me, I don't know how his performances were almost, for me anyway, becoming slightly worrying for the division, because it's like, if he's just going to run through everyone and then, say, move up, it doesn't actually do the flyweights as much good as maybe it seemed when he first, earlier this year when his stock really started to rise. But I think this just, it's nice to know that there are people out there who will be able to challenge Figueiredo. And I'm incredibly excited for the rematch whenever it should happen. And I thought, I don't want to say the Oliveira Ferguson result was predictable, because I think there was just a lot of question marks around Tony and how much he's got left in the tank. But it wasn't wholly surprising to me that he lost. I was a bit surprised it was as convincing as it was. But I think Oliveira is just looking like such a well-rounded fighter at the moment. Again, they made the point a load on commentary, but it feels like he's just really coming into his own at the right time. And I'm just excited for what matchups await him as well, to be honest.
Well, I was saying to James on yesterday's show, before it was fight week, I was predicting Charles Oliveira decision, but after seeing the likes of the UFC Embedded series and Tony's confidence leading into the fight, I couldn't back against him, so I ended up changing my prediction to a Tony decision. But now I think there's either two options. There's obviously he could retire, because I don't know how much he's got left in the tank. He's obviously got 36-ish, and obviously that's quite old in one of the most talented divisions they've got at the moment. But there's also a potential fight with Paul Felder, which I've seen a lot of fans fantasize about, as you say, which if Tony turned up and if Paul turned up would be a great fight. But would you be down for seeing that fight?
Yeah, I think if Tony is to keep fighting, and I think he will, he's getting on 36, 37, but I think he will keep fighting. But I think it has to be someone like Felder, It can't be, it obviously won't be a Conor or Dustin. No reason to see a rematch with Gaethje. It's just, at that top end, unfortunately, the way his last couple of fights have gone, there's no one there for him. But I think also that would be a huge, even though I think there's maybe enough evidence based on this year to suggest that Tony is now certainly past his prime. I don't necessarily want to say on his way out just yet, but I think although there's that sort of evidence that he's tailing off, it would still be, obviously the biggest name on Felder's resume. So, and I think Felder's someone that everyone really likes. And I'd be happy to see him get that fight, to be honest. And I just think it makes a lot of sense. And I think for Oliveira, it probably makes sense to fight the winner of Conor versus Dustin at this point, maybe.
Well, this weekend we've got a monster of a card. We've got the likes of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Jeff Neal, and all the other guys on there. What do you make the main event for that one?
I think it's a really exciting main event. I mean, I love Wonderboy. I don't know how you can't love Wonderboy. I'm wondering if it's going to be one of those where he gets, with the power that Neal has, if he just gets caught a bit like he did against Pettis. I mean, the KO by Pettis was obviously such a crazy finish. But I don't know. I'll go with Wonderboy. I just think he's such a, even though, again, he's not the youngest, and again, in a really talented division as well. I just think, he's proven so many times that he is just, I don't think the matchups in recent years, like the champions there have been, like Woodley and now Usman, I wouldn't ever see him beating Usman. But in terms of just pure talent, I think he is, one of the absolute best welterweights around. And I think he's a better fighter than Neil. But I still think Neil's like a dangerous proposition. Yeah. What about you guys?
Well, I was saying yesterday. I think this is going to be a close one, but I think it's going to go all 5 rounds. I think it's going to be quite technical, striking wise. Obviously, Stephen Thompson, great striker, and Jeff Neal, really good striker as well. But I think I'm edging just towards Wonderboy on a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, literally the same. I think technically speaking, as Mason just said, I think Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's got all the tools within his striking arsenal to sort of pick Jeff Neal apart. And it's going to be a tough one for Jeff Neal because obviously he was supposed to fight Neil Magny in August, had to pull out of that one, unfortunately. And the last time we saw him fight was at 245, I believe, a year ago. I think a year ago yesterday, I believe, which was the Usman Covington card where he beat Mike Perry via a sensational first round knockout. And to go from, with no disrespect to Mike Perry, a mediocre athlete, and Mike Perry, who is not going to get anywhere near that top 10, to a former contender for the welterweight title, it really is a big step up. And, you know, Neil deserves all the plaudits because it's not a tough ask. It's a really tough ask to get out there and fight Wonderboy and get the job done. I think stylistically, it's a great matchup for Neil. However, I just think Wonderboy has the edge wherever the fight goes, but you never know, that sort of knockout power is there on Jeff Neal's side. So it's got all the ingredients to be an absolute banger of a main event. And unfortunately, the previous main event got cancelled, but what replacement main event this is?
Well, I was going to ask you what way you guys would have leant if we had seen Chimaev versus Edwards.
Well, I think I don't know, because there's a part of me that thought obviously Chimaev could have just steamrolled Edwards, but then the sensible side of it just thought Edwards is too smart for that. I think this would go all 5 rounds because I don't think Chimaev would finish Edwards. I just think he's too tough. I don't think Edwards has been finished in the US. I think his only loss was to Kamaru.
Decision to Usman, right?
Yeah. So I don't think Chimaev would have finished him at all. The only way Chimaev would have won, I believe, is if he kept him down and kept him down there for 5 rounds. But I think it would have been like 4 rounds to 1 like decision for Edwards. What about you, James?
It's a tough one to say this because obviously I'm that sort of person who believes in ring rust. I think it does sort of play a factor, but again, it's one of those the Wonderboy versus Neil situation to go from Meerschaert. Naturally, we can all agree that Khamzat Chimaev is a natural welterweight. That's his sort of, if he's going to compete, it's got to be at welterweight, and it will be at welterweight. To go from a guy like Joel Meerschaert, where it took only 18 seconds to finish him, to Leon Edwards, who's sort of challenging for a title at welterweight, is such a big ask for Khamzat Chimaev. And, you know, he deserves all the credit in the world because that guy is legit and he's undefeated, and we all love watching him because he's got some highlight reel knockouts. But again, this will be his toughest test to date. How can he deal against a guy like Leon Edwards, who hasn't fought in over 13 months? Regardless, I still believe Leon's been training day in, day out, because this is probably going to be one of the toughest fights of his life. I see this one going the full distance as well. I think Leon has his number. I think it's going to be a bit of a tough ask for Khamzat Chimaev to get the job done because, again, the level of competition from Meerschaert to Edwards is a significant gap. So I'm going to go, you got to back your home countryman on this one. And if he does put in a very good performance against Chimaev, that may lead to a title shot with the win between the winner of Usman and Burns, which is due to take place in March, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about that fight, Alex?
Yeah, I think it's I just think Chimaev is still such an unknown quantity. But then there's also the question marks around Edwards having been out for so long. I mean, as you said, James, like no doubt he's been training non-stop. And to be fair, I guess if you're going to is ring rust as big of a factor if you're fighting without fans? Do you know what I mean? I feel like maybe it makes it a bit easier because the environment is going to be closer to when you're just training. Certainly, yeah, it would be huge if Chimaev won just because of the gap in kind of level of competition from Meerschaert to Edwards. I think Chimaev is capable of beating better people than Meerschaert. You know what I mean? I think he's capable of beating better people than that. Whether he's capable of beating Edwards, I don't know. I think, like you guys, I would see it going the full distance. And then I suppose I'm just grateful that although you can get funny decisions in MMA, I'm just grateful it's not boxing, because I think it's one of those where if it went the distance and it was close, but you felt like Edwards was going to win, I think in boxing, this would certainly go Chimaev's way. But like, as I said, hopefully won't get anything like that happen. So I think hopefully I'd like to see Edwards get it done. I know he gets a bit of stick for not talking enough trash, but he's just such a phenomenal fighter, and nothing against Chimaev, but I would love to see Edwards just go out and kind of prove a lot of people wrong. And I would back him. As I said, so many unknowns around Chimaev, but at the same time, if Chimaev won a decision, I wouldn't be like, I'd be impressed. I don't think I'd be astounded, because as I said, although it's a big jump in competition, I just get the feeling he's closer to Edwards' level than Meerschaert's anyway. You know, whether he's actually on that level or not, I'm sure the people he's been training with, I reckon he's closer to that level, even though he's not had the chance to show it in a fight yet. But I think it's it's a really entertaining proposition, and yeah, looking forward to it when it does happen.
Well, there's two. Well, hopefully that fight happens in 2021. It's rumored to be happening on January 20th, but January 16th, Max Holloway, Calvin Kattar. What do you think of that one?
I think that's a really fun one. I think it should be, a really fun fight. Kattar's boxing is obviously so good. I do see Holloway winning, and I think it probably will be something he really needs. I mean, I think I had him winning the second fight against Volkanovski, but I do think it was maybe slightly closer than some people thought in the moment. I know some people thought Holloway won twice, but yeah, I think So I think fans will give him a bit of slack because he's coming off back-to-back losses. In fact, hang on, did he beat someone between Volkanovski and Poirier? Did he?
Yeah, he beat
Edgar.
Yeah,
yeah. So he's coming off of back-to-back losses, but some people would argue he won both of them. So I think people will cut him some slack if this doesn't go his way, but I think it will go his way, and I think it's regardless of whether you think a fight has won or not. Sometimes it is important what shows up on their record, and I think he needs to get another W, to be honest, just to convince Dana White that he's worth keeping around that title picture. Yeah, what about you guys?
Well, I'm really looking forward to this because I was backing Volko going into the Max Holloway fight, the second fight, but now Max Holloway's fighting Calvin Kattar. Before the Volko fights, I loved watching Max. I still do, but I just had to back Volko on that occasion. But I just really think Max is going to have I think Max's boxing and striking is going to be a little bit better than Kattar's. They're both exceptional, but I think Holloway's going to have the upper hand, and I think it will go 5 rounds. I think it'll be a close one. I think it'll be Max Holloway edging the decision, but I wouldn't be surprised if Calvin Kattar pulled out a decision either.
Yeah, no, totally. I think this one does go the full 5 rounds. I think you look at it on paper, Calvin Kattar, one of the biggest rising stars in the 145 division, he has absolute crisp boxing, and it's a joy to watch. I think he's on a 2-fight win streak over Danny Ige and Jeremy Stevens, and his only losses were to Moicano, dangerous grounder artist, and Zabit, who again he took that fight on short notice. So kudos to Kattar for taking that one on short notice. So I think what it comes down to is, who's the better boxer. And I think when you look at the stats, it's clear that Kattar is going into the fight with a better inch advantage with regards to the reach. But Holloway tends to land more, and he's very busy. And that's why we all love Max Holloway, because he's very busy, standing and trading. And that's sort of why he's become a well-established household name in the UFC, because, he loves to fight. He's very active. And with Holloway, he has the ability to use his kicks and wrestling if needed. That's always in his back pocket. And Holloway's a cardio machine for days. And Kattar has a decent gas tank yet, but we haven't really seen it. And if it's to go 4 or 5 rounds, I think Calvin Kattar's sort of certainly got to bring his A game for a guy like Max Holloway, as a former champion. And yeah, I think Calvin Kattar may have the edge in terms of the boxing department, but in terms of the well-rounded striking approach, I think technically and logistically speaking, I think Max Holloway has the edge wherever the fight goes, and that'll be the deciding factor in the fight. So I think it's going to be the 4-5 rounds, I believe. I'm going to go for Max by decision.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Conor Dustin fight that's happening on the 23rd?
I'm really excited actually for that. I just think because Dustin has improved so much, obviously, since the first fight. That said, I think Conor really has as well. And I think because he's less active, maybe that's not like one of the big narratives going into it. I think the narrative is kind of, well, it should be so much closer than last time. But yeah, I just think Conor has it kind of improved as well. I know Cowboy was like a very beatable opponent, but you think about the array of offense he displayed in those 40 seconds. I mean, almost every sort of shot he could have thrown and landed, he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I just get the feeling, Conor's gonna. Again, I know he's not as active, but I think Conor is a better fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I think other than Khabib, I think he probably is the best lightweight around. And again, maybe it sounds silly to say that because he's not fighting enough, and his last fight was at welterweight. But I think he's going to go out and prove that. I don't know. That said, I find it really difficult to actually picture the way the fight ends. I mean, I want to say Conor by decision, but then obviously you've got that issue of we've only, it's rare to see Conor go the full 5 rounds. I mean, in the UFC, Diaz was the only time, right? So in the rematch. So yeah, and Poirier's got great cardio. So I'm hesitantly going to say Conor by decision. It wouldn't surprise me if he kind of gets it done earlier than people expect, though. And as much as I love Dustin, I think it would be great to see like flashes of the old Conor. Whatever you think about him, I think there's no doubting that the UFC is just more exciting with him around. And so for him to go out there, and if he does dispatch Dustin, it would just be a ridiculously impressive statement. And Dana White wants him. I'm surprised they've not slapped the title on this. Because that Dana White wants Conor McGregor to have a UFC title again. I'm not saying he's engineering it so that he will. Because if he were, I think he'd just put the belt on this. But I think Dana White wants Conor in that position again. And as a businessman, you would. I actually think Oliveira is potentially going to be the toughest. Like I said, if Conor comes through Dustin and they do make the Oliveira fight, that's one I'm really intrigued to see, because I think that could be really dangerous. But yeah, what about you two?
I can't wait for this one. I think obviously last time out, the emotions got the better of Dustin. Obviously, he was saying in lead up to the fight, he's never hated a guy as much. But I think now they've both got the mutual respect of each other. I think they're just going in there for the purpose of fighting, not just because of the opponent. I think obviously for Dustin, it's going to be a huge payday, but I don't think that's going to undermine the fact that he's fighting one of the best fighters around at the moment. But I believe Conor is always going to have the edge over Dustin. I think Dustin, like we were saying yesterday, I think Dustin might clip him and he'll see an opportunity for the finish and he'll go all out. Conor will counter. So I'm predicting a Conor second round finish.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough one to call. I mean, I totally agree with your comment earlier, Alex. I mean, what people tend to sort of overlook upon is Conor McGregor has improved since the first fight with Dustin Poirier. And not many people want to believe that. And you just look at what he's done. Obviously, he's become the first 2-division world champion in the UFC. And every time he fights, just that aura is just second to none. And he's completely transcended the sport since his arrival from Cage Warriors. It's breathtaking to see. And we all enjoy a Conor McGregor fight week because we'll all back it. We'll all get behind it. Marketably, there's no other marketable fighter than Conor McGregor. He's at the top of his game. He draws in the numbers. And with the fight with Dustin Poirier, I think it's the rematch. Out of all the potential opponents that was next for McGregor after Cowboy Cerrone, I think Dustin Poirier made the most sense, because if you wanted that path back to the lightweight throne, you'd have to have gotten through Dustin Poirier first, because he was the former interim champion. I know Gaethje was rising through the ranks and he had his fight with Tony Ferguson. So I think Dustin Poirier makes the most sense. How it will go, I'm thinking a McGregor victory, but I think it will last a bit longer than the first fight. I think what we see with Dustin Poirier is got a cardio machine for days. I think he can last a full 5 rounds with Conor McGregor, no problem whatsoever. The problem is in the earlier rounds, when it gets a bit feisty and when it gets a bit dangerous and when it gets a bit sort of under the pressure, and when Dustin Poirier is under the cosh, how he's going to survive that. Because we've seen with Dustin Poirier in every single fight, if the finish is there, he'll get so invested in the finish. And if he doesn't get the finish, that leaves him susceptible to the left-hand counter. And Conor McGregor has got the best left hand in the lightweight division, and he will catch you at some point. And I think he'll rock him in the first round and ultimately get it done in the second, because come the third and then the championship rounds in the fourth and fifth, Conor McGregor does not want to be sitting around there waiting for the finish and then trying to invest, because it will take its toll going into the fourth and fifth. So I'm going to go for McGregor in the second.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you guys. I can see it being maybe later in the second. I just think you look at, I know every fight, every matchup is different, but I just kind of feel like, look at how much Dustin got hit and hurt by Hooker. And Conor is a much more technically sound, a much more clinical fighter. Even Holloway came on, I think, like strong as that fight against Dustin went on about a year and a half ago, and doesn't have, he's a volume striker, doesn't have anywhere near the power that Conor has, and he was hitting Dustin quite a lot. So I can kind of see Conor getting it done late in the second. As I said, we've only obviously seen Conor go for 5 rounds once. If it does go the distance, obviously it gets more dangerous for Conor, but I can maybe see it being similar to the Nate rematch. I can maybe see it going down like Conor does. He has a really good first couple of rounds. Maybe Dustin comes back into it, but Conor just does enough to scrape it. But I'm really excited. I think it's a great matchup. A year on from the Cowboy fight, it's great to see Conor in with someone a bit more competitive. And like I said, just hopefully he kind of sticks around throughout the year and we see him a bit more active.
Well, something I was going to ask you on the show now is, who do you think could be the next European MMA champion? Well, not European, sorry. Let's say British to narrow it down.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know what? If Edwards can come through Chimaev, I know he lost to Usman before, but I think Edwards is such a great fighter, and I think there's always a chance there. So I'm tempted to lean. I am tempted to lean with Edwards towards Edwards still. I mean, I know you said not European. I think Marvin Vettori is a great fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if he can. He had a decent effort against Adesanya a few years ago, but I don't know if I can. As long as Adesanya is in the middleweight division, I don't know if Vettori is quite on that level, or the level of like a Whittaker, who I think Vettori, he called out Costa. I know Dana White played down Costa versus Whittaker, but it does seem that could get made next year. If not, I actually think Vettori versus Costa could be really competitive. And if Vettori wins that, that's a huge statement, even though I know a lot of people are quick to kind of dismiss Costa because of the way he lost to Adesanya, but he's still a very dangerous fighter. So yeah, I'd go with Edwards. I think Vettori is very talented, but there are a few European fighters who I think are really talented in their divisions, but maybe just not quite good enough to be champion with who is ahead of them,
100%. I agree as well. Like, obviously, a lot of people's obvious answer would edge towards Darren Till for the next British, but I just think the level of opponents that are in the middleweight division, obviously, I think Darren's more than capable of beating Rob on a decision. Like, I believe I didn't score the fight to Darren in the Rob fight, but I believe on any given night he could have got the decision, but I don't see him beating Adesanya. I just don't see him winning that. I'd say for British, the next possible could be, like you said, Leon Edwards if he got through Chimaev and then fought Usman, but someone that's not in the rankings at the minute, I believe the likes of Tom Aspinall and Lerone Murphy in their respective weight divisions, in a few more fights in a couple of years' time with more training, more high caliber opponents, I think they've got more than capable of, especially with Tom Aspinall as well in the heavyweight division. Anyone's got the power to be champion just based on power alone. But with Lerone as well, he's undefeated. The only time it's not gone his way was his debut, the draw against Hugov. But then guys, obviously, hopefully they can become English champions, but we just have to wait and see. What about you, James? What do you think?
I think the obvious sort of candidate for the next British champion is Leon Edwards. I mean, he's learned a lot since the defeat to Kamaru Usman. He's become a better fighter, and we've sort of seen more, he's added a lot more to his game in every fight, and it's refreshing to see that. And I think if he gets the job done against Khamzat Chimaev, then ultimately he will get the title shot against Kamaru Usman or Gilbert Burns, whoever wins that fight. And it'll be interesting to see if he can get the job done. But in terms of the European standpoint and who the next European champion might be, I mean, I'm going to throw a name out there in the light heavyweight division who's impressed me a lot, by the name of Yuri Prochazka, who had an excellent performance in his debut against Volkan Oezdemir. And for such a young age, I think he's about mid-20s, 27, 28, he's had a relentless and a crazy amount of professional fights under his belt, under various promotions across Europe. And I think he's got a tough test. I believe he's booked up against Dominic Reyes in February and March. So if he can get the job done then with Dominic Reyes, who hasn't been on the best of runs recently, lost to John Jones, and then convincingly to Jan Blachowicz. And the light heavyweight division seems to be up in limbo right now. I mean, Jan Blachowicz, he's getting on a bit, and I don't see him holding on to the belt for a very long time. And he's got a fight with Adesanya, and potentially, I don't know. But if Adesanya wants to stay at light heavyweight, which I don't think he will, I think he'll want to clean up the middleweight division, maybe vacates the title. And if Prochazka beats Dominic Reyes, then I can see him getting the vacant title light heavyweight shot. And I genuinely believe he's got the striking skill set to go all the way. And that's certainly a candidate for the European shot who would go under the radar a bit, whereby not many people would bring up his name for the next European champion. But you touched upon Marvin Vettori there, Alex, earlier. He's a very good fighter. He's another one that's come a long way since his defeat to Israel Adesanya, which was very close. And he's just, again, added that sort of more to his game, whereby we see he's, from the striking standpoint, he always said he was the better striker against Jack Hermansson, whereby we don't tend to see Marvin Vettori as that high-level striker. And he fought Jack Hermansson a couple of times with that left hand in the first round, and he deserves his seat at the top of the middleweight division. So fair play to Marvin Vettori. If he can get it done against whoever next, I can see him being in with the shout. But again, no one's beating Israel Adesanya anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I should say before I forget is actually I think Rakic at light heavyweight.
Yes,
I think it's one of those where he's a very talented fighter. He's shown that in his recently. I think maybe his only recent loss was like very much disputable or via decision. And I just think if the chips kind of fall his way, depending on if I could see him beating Blachowicz. It depends what Adesanya does. I can't see anyone beating Adesanya, as you said, but I think Rakic is actually probably pretty close, and it wouldn't surprise me too much. I could see him beating Blachowicz for sure.
100%. Well, that's everything I added to talk about today, James. You got anything to add?
This has sort of crept up on my mind recently. I know we've seen the end of UFC MMA Year Awards, and I just wanted to get your thoughts for both of you as to who you think's been the most improved fighter over the course of the year.
Most improved? That is a tough one. I'll let Alex answer this one first, because I'll have to think about it.
I'm under the bus.
I was going to try and get you to go. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll let James go first. He gives us both of us more time to think.
Throw me under the bus. I think Kevin Holland. I believe so. Since his loss over the last couple years ago, I think he's on a 5-fight win streak. He deserves a lot of credits, and he deserves the plaudits from a lot of the guys out there. And I just enjoy the sort of the fight night. Come fight night, you can tell Kevin Holland is really invested in his performance, and it really does want to get the win. And you saw his performance over Jacare Souza. I mean, that was just nothing short of spectacular. To do what he did, I think it was I said yesterday, that was the second knockout from the ground in UFC history behind Nico Price. So fair dues. And, you saw him in the walkout, he was really calm and collected. He was engaging with Jacare Souza. And I just love those sort of fighters. And another name there is Deiveson Figueiredo, because the flyweight division in January this year, Dana White was talking about scrapping it completely, and arguably Figueiredo saved the division. And now we've got that clear standout dominant champion for potential years to come. But again, with that draw against Brandon Moreno, the flyweight division is here to stay. And I think that's credit to Deiveson Figueiredo, who destroyed Joseph Benavidez twice and then got the victory over Alex Perez, which was very convincing. So the clear standout choices for me are either Deiveson Figueiredo or Kevin Holland. And I would say Khamzat Chimaev, but he hasn't really fought in the UFC that much. I think he only got the contract in the summer. So those two for me.
I'll go next. Yeah, I'd agree with you on the Kevin Owens sense, just because his first fight of the year, I believe, was May, I think, and he's fought 5 times and won 5 times. He's fought the likes of, obviously, Charlie Ontivero, Joaquin Buckley, Darren Stewart, and now Jacare Souza. And with the knockout, it's just, obviously, you can't deny he's got to be up there for fighter of the year just based off 5 fights, 5 wins alone. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, you know what? Now that you said it, I think Holland probably is the best choice. I mean, especially with how active he's been, and as you said, the names he's beaten. I know Souza's getting on a bit, but yeah, for him to beat Jacare in the manner he did, I think he's a good bet. I mean, I know a lot of people were saying Figueiredo for outright fighter of the year. I don't know if the draw changes things a bit or not, but I mean, yeah, I think Holland probably for most improved, and then maybe Figueiredo for outright fighter of the year, given a lot of people think he won anyway. And I just don't know if there's another like obvious candidate, like doing it that consistently, that frequently at that level, you know, again, even more so than Holland, kind of in title fights. I think, yeah, those two stand out for me this year as well.
Well, I just thought of 2 more things for both years. Knockout of the year and full out fight of the year. Who would you go for?
That's a tough one. Knockout of the year has to be Buckley's over Impa.
Yeah.
Has to be. And fight of the year, I was, before last weekend, I would have given it easily, hands down, to Zhang Weili versus Joanna. Based on last weekend, I'm probably still going to give it to Zhang Weili versus Joanna. I mean, that was just absolutely incredible. And you saw the pictures after the fight of the pair. It was a great fight to watch, and it was one of the best female women's MMA fight in the history of any promotion, regardless of the UFC, Bellator, what have you. And it certainly, it must have inspired a lot of young women to get out there and get into the ring and just see those two women put on a great display for the fans and on a stage where it really mattered, where the world was watching. They deserve their credit. So I'm probably going to go for Zhang Weili versus Joanna for fight of the year.
I'd agree. Like, I think I'd probably go Joanna versus Weili, and then, for me, I had Dustin versus Hooker just behind that, and I don't know. I feel like I'm tempted to still keep that just behind it and then go with the flyweight title fight. But really, all 3 of those are so close in my mind that maybe I'd swap around the second and third. I don't know. I have to agree with Buckley as KO of the year. It might be the best KO I've ever seen. Genuinely, I know I know recency bias is a thing, but genuinely, it's like a goal, right? It's kind of like a very subjective thing. I love a goal that flies in off the crossbar. I love a volley. But there's something about how unique and aesthetically pleasing that KO was that it might be the best I've ever seen. It's certainly the best I've seen this year.
100%. I agree with you both. The knockout's got to go to Buckley against Impa. It's just, I don't think we'll see anything like that again. Just how we got the knockout and then fight of the year. I would have to go for Zhang and Young Jacek, just because I seen, obviously Dana White was buzzing for that fight, but I seen a lot of people not too excited for the fight. But I just thought all out war, and then I'd go Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno, and then Dustin and Hooker. But them second and third, well, all 3 are really close, but the second and third are as close as you can get. But yeah, I think for fight of the year, it's got to be Zhang Weili and Joanna Young Jacek. But yeah, have you got anything else to add today, James?
No, that's literally all for me. I appreciate your time, Alex, once again. I know during these times, and you must be really busy with work right now.
Yeah. No, it's my pleasure, guys. Actually, I'm talking to Bruce Buffer later on today, actually, for I'm doing a retrospective piece on the first Conor versus Dustin fight. So I've chatted to Megan Levy, chatted to Ariel Helwani, and yeah, chatting to Bruce Buffer tonight for the first time, which will be really fun. Just trying to do a piece kind of with people who were around the first fight week and fight night, to really kind of put people into that moment. So I'm going to be doing that later on. But yeah, no, it's always fun to chat to you guys. So thank you for having me again.
Yeah, so cheers for having on, Alex. Obviously, this was the last episode of the year. Hopefully next year comes with many more guests and many more episodes, and hopefully we will get you back on again next year. Cheers for joining us, Alex.
I'd love to. Thanks, guys. Have a great Christmas and a great New Year as well.
You too,
You
Alex.
stay safe.